Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 27th, 2021 special meeting of the Pine Richland School Board. Please join me first in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Ms. Williams.
Mr. Lyons?
Here.
Mrs. Misbach?
Here.
Mr. Kashani?
Here.
Mr. DiTullio?
Here.
Dr. Mihalik?
Here.
Dr. Meyer?
Here.
Mr. Moy?
Here.
Mrs. Swope?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. We will move to our recognition of visitors before we deliberate on appointing a new board member. Ms. Williams or Mr. Stovener, do we have visitors in the waiting room?
We do. Mr. John Corey is our first caller. Mr. Stovener will reach out to him now.
I think Mr. Corey knows the drill, but please limit your comments to 3 minutes this evening, everyone. Good evening. Mr. Corey, it's Pete Lyons. You're on with the board.
Hi, Mr. Lyons. This is John Corey. I live at 306 North Wind Court. I'm here tonight just to talk to you guys a little bit. First, before I say any of my comments, I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Your guys' job is not easy. You guys dedicate your time and you're volunteers. I think your job is hard, and this year's been even harder, and now this job has gotten really hard. I appreciate your efforts. I've always been respectful. I will always be respectful. For those members of this community who are choosing not to be respectful, I disagree with all of that. The emails to you guys should be respectful. People should share their opinions, but it should all be respectful, in my opinion. As far as the coach losing his job, I am a football parent. I've coached in the youth in this community for a long time. When I read through all the stuff, I haven't commented until I had a chance to form an opinion. And some of the stuff just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, which is why I'm here talking to you guys tonight. First, the issues of, a policy that goes into the locker room. I looked for that policy all over Pine Richland's, web pages, and I can't find it. So we're referencing a policy that I don't know where they're getting that policy from. So I can't find it. I'm having a hard time understanding how we can reference something we don't even have. Next is how the investigation was handled. I talked to a bunch of PR families and football families their sons were talked to by Mr. Salapak, and they feel like their words that they were lied to and how it was approached, meaning that it's just a conversation. It's very casual. A bunch of those families have then gotten letters of reprimand in the mail from the district around those conversations. And the district now will not talk to any of those families about those letters of reprimand, which I don't understand how we got to that point either, guys. How we got to a point where the district no longer will talk to families about letters of reprimand they've given their kids. That's just not anything that makes any sense to me. Next thing is, if you read Coach's, I don't know if he did or didn't, but he did an interview with the PG and he talked about, he felt the same thing. He asked Mrs. Bowman, is this serious? And the word he got back was, it's just casual, which is why he, in his words, showed up in flip-flops and a t-shirt. And he apologized. He said he was wrong and he got frustrated in the interview process. And I think in the end that what I learned is that this administration put a professional improvement plan, a PIP, in place for this football program 3 years ago. And since that PIP was put in place, this program has been completely clean. There's nothing in there in that 3-year period, which kind of explains why Coach might have been frustrated. He still handled that interview wrong, and he said he did. And we're also talking about a man who's a 23-year educator in phys ed. I would want him to have the same levity to handle some of these situations that we trust the administration in these buildings to handle when you're talking about teenage boys and physical altercations. I'm hoping that the board followed up with some of these allegations and that there actually is cooperation when we're talking about a man losing his job. And again, this has been completely clean in the last 3 years since the PIP was put in place.
That's 3 minutes.
Really
Could you
hard
wind
to
up?
understand.
That's 3 minutes, Mr. Corey. Could you take 10 seconds to wind up your comments?
Sure. Lastly, I'm asking you guys as a group, you're the only people in this district that can solve this. You have the power to ask questions. You have the ability to go to administration and say, you need to explain this to us. This district is not in a good place right now, guys. You're the only people who can solve this. So I'm asking you to work for all of our benefit to try to make this better and have more conversations, please. I wish you guys luck tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Corey.
Next is Mr. Randy Davis. Okay, we'll go on to
It appears the call did not connect, so we'll move to the next.
Mr. Jason Royal.
Voice message system 7.
Okay, we'll move on to Rob Brown.
Good afternoon, Rob Brown.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brown. This is Pete Lyons. You're on with the board. We ask you to take 3 minutes for your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. So what I guess my concern is with the board and with the administration is I do not have a child in the program, but what I would like to address is a question to the board as well as the administration as far as integrity. And the integrity piece is if one of the candidates, elected or appointed, had a background or history of domestic violence, was known before they were appointed or elected, would the board or the administration approve of that person being within the Pine Ridgeland School District? I believe the community would like to know if that's the question, that would be suffice. If it is, as well as our superintendent, Dr. Miller, if they would approve of that moving forward. So with that, I go back to the administration not renewing Mr. Coach K's appointment to another year of coaching, because in my eyes, the only people that have a documented history of violence or hazing, which has been pointed out by the board, really is just a couple of board members, which is really kind of sad. So in this case, we all know this, it's public record.
We have a right to know. We have done right to knows with existing board members. And I really don't want to call back in the sense of the administration saying, okay, great, because they won't answer questions on these calls. And I understand the whole, fraternity type thing of, with the administration, the board. What I would like to know is would any of the board members today approve of an appointment or an election of somebody who has a history of domestic violence to their home or residence? Would they allow that? If you're not willing to answer that, and we all know where that comes from, I would really ask you, Peter, to resign your position as the president of the board. And Mr. Miller, I'm sorry, you know me, I know you. You have, coached in a district that I know what you have done to individuals as far as coaching. I don't know how you could actually move forward with this. So
That's 3 minutes,
this is
Mr.
what-
Brown. Please wind up your comments.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Mr. Lyons. Mr. Lyons, I just asked you to resign. If you can't resign,
Mr. Stobener,
That was the last community member that wished to address the board.
so y'all still good? This is what you're up against. Courage in the face of community members who would rather burn the house down than deal with the democratically elected body that makes decisions that they do not agree with. So it takes courage to be here. I thank you all very much for showing that courage to volunteer and to serve. This is what democracy looks like. Mr. Brown thinks that's what it looks like. Some people think Facebook is democracy. It is not. These are the norms. These are the conditions we operate under. We've had a resignation, and this body, under the rights entitled by the legislature, has not just a right, but an obligation to appoint a replacement from the members of the community. And that's what we're gathered to do here tonight. So we have outlined a procedure well honed over years to do just that. We have two different portions of candidate interviews. The first portion tonight will be a one-on-many interview with each candidate, focusing on what we call the big three questions. You'll all hear those in a moment when we go through that portion of the candidate interviews. Each candidate will hear the same three questions in order, and they'll be interviewed one at a time. After we're done with the first candidate, the second candidate will come in without having had the opportunity to hear the first or second or third candidate's answers. So we thought that would be more effective. My understanding is that each of you have agreed to voluntarily leave the room. And Ms. Williams, you've determined an order for the candidates as well, have you not?
Yes, I have. We're going to go, if we'll have Mrs. Dawson stay in the room, and if everybody else would step out, then we'll go in order by Mrs. Ravati, Mrs. Beisel, Mrs. Hayden, and then Mr. Delicio. So there's some seats out there that you're welcome to. And we'll give Mrs. Dawson 2 minutes to tell us a little bit about herself as well.
Welcome, Ms. Dawson. So you do have a couple minutes to give an introductory statement. We'll offer that opportunity to each candidate, and then we'll go into the big three questions.
Well, I was contestant number 1 in the junior Miss pageant, and I didn't win, so just let you know that out of the gate. But I'm here tonight because I care a lot about our community, and for this reason, I ran for the board many years ago, and I served on the board for 10 years. Willingly, not stressfully, even though many of the topics that we discussed were stressful. But tonight I'm here because I had actually originally ran for this seat, and although I'm not interested in seeking any kind of board re-election or anything, I did see it as an opportunity for me to once again serve the community in a way that I'm familiar with and in a way that I have a proven track record for representing the community. And one of the things I pointed out in my essay was about communication. And I think that our district right now is under a communication attack. And I really am heartfelt here to step in to make it a seamless moment for us, because I, again, care a lot about this community. And I know how the system works. And I'm here to help, and that's really why I'm here.
Thank you, Ms. Dawson. For the big three questions, I'd like Mr. Kashani handle the first one, Mr. DiTullio, question number 2, and Ms. Misbeck, I think 3 is really apropos for you. And if we could just follow that order and make it easier, because I'll forget if you guys could remember.
Sure.
So, Mr. Kashani, why don't you begin?
My pleasure. Thank you, Peter. May I call you Therese?
Oh, of course.
Good to see you, Therese. And thank you for that opening statement. Well said, and it touches my heart to hear you say such a heartfelt message. I, too, am very saddened by the state, and attack is a good word. We're under attack. So I'm going to change, this question actually has a number in it, but I'm going to change the number in it because the number isn't relevant for this particular circumstance. The number is 2 years, but we're talking about 7 months. So from your
Mark, I think,
Yeah.
so up on the big three,
Yeah.
it's, which question are you at?
Am I looking at the wrong one?
I think you are.
Big three questions?
No, he's
You good?
Yeah.
not 2 years, but it's.
I'm going to change the number.
Yeah,
There's no reason to ask her about 2 years.
Make sure you do it for the others.
Yeah. From your perspective, what are the biggest challenges facing our school district in the next 7 months?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, as an interim, stepping in interimly, I see that the biggest challenge is the rapport with the community. Right now, in this moment, and the transition from a COVID model to hopefully an in-class learning model. I mean, these all have been attacks on our education model this year. I think that you all have navigated that as best as you could. But again, assembling an opinion from the community is a very challenging thing to do. And I have had a lot of practice at it. And one of the things as a board member is that you cannot, you have to weigh everything, There's like beyond a reasonable doubt and a preponderance if I'm in a court of law, right? And a preponderance is that's like what I think, right? But, beyond a reasonable doubt is like, let's put it all on the table. And, it's not what I think, it's what I can weigh, So the biggest challenge, to answer your question, in the next 7 months is, how we portray ourselves to restore trust that has been attacked and somehow fractured and broken. That's what I see.
Thank you.
Greg?
Hey, Therese, how you doing?
Hi, Greg.
Hey, it's good to see you back in the boardroom.
Thank you.
And good luck tonight. So, assuming, getting right into a question, assuming that the school board is facing a tough budget decision and the choice is either to raise taxes or to cut a program, what would you do?
So this is no stranger to me. We did this during the Peasers event, and that was very stressful for the community at large. And so again, different seasons for different ways to look at things. And I think that what we've just come out of economically has been very dramatic as a country, a world. And so one of the things I know about this community's budget is that, about 80% of it comes from us, the people, not from the state, not from the feds. And, that makes our community voice a little bit louder. So again, when you're navigating, do you cut a program, do you raise taxes, you have to know what your 80% voice says, because we're the ones paying the taxes. So I think people live in Pine Richland because they know what we deliver here in the way of academic excellence and whole child care and those opportunities. So to answer your question, I don't know, because I don't have the facts in front of me. So when I would have that, and I would get the sentiment of the community based on, and again, I've navigated this in the past with the Peasers, and we have lots of people show up. So I don't know until I know, and we know together.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Therese.
Hi.
So I'll just go right into the question. So what is the best way to address differences of opinion on the board or between the board and the administration? What is your view?
So again, I picked my topic for the essay to be communication because I think that clear communication is extremely important. And I think that sometimes messaging is challenging because of perspective, So sometimes the administration may think they're delivering a clear message, and we may feel like we're delivering clear questions back. But if you could repeat the question just one more time so I don't miss the essence of it.
So what is the best way to address differences of opinion on the board, between the board members? I'll add in between the board members because that's what on the board means, or between the board and the administration?
Well, you ask good questions, and you deliberate based on respectful civil discourse, which from time to time is based on the individuals that are discoursing. So I think that the difference in opinion is about asking good questions and having discussions that respect difference of opinion so that consensus is derived eventually based on those questions being answered.
Thank you.
I hope that was a good answer.
Thank you, Mrs. Dawson. Can we bring in?
Mrs. Ravati.
You can remain because there's no more
because I
secrets. You already know the questions, so yeah.
Want me to just?
Mrs. Ravati, it is, Greg. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know Mrs. Ravati.
Come on.
Hi, welcome back. So, yeah, just have a seat. Check, make sure your mic is on. I think Christine, by the way, is your mic definitely on? I couldn't hear you
It
too.
is. I will move it closer to me.
There you go.
Is that better?
Christine's she's a low talker.
I got my low voices. Sorry.
Have a seat. Have a seat. So,
Okay, if I stand?
yeah, actually,
Yeah.
totally get that. So,
I've been sitting all day.
yeah, you could an introductory statement, and then we ask you the big three questions, the same questions we're asking each candidate in order tonight.
Sure. First off, thank you for convening for a special meeting for this matter. I know that board directors do volunteer a lot of time that largely goes unnoticed. It's one of those thankless positions out there. My name is Kathleen Ravati. I am a mother in the Pine Richland District. Have one daughter who is currently in Eaton Hall Upper Elementary. I'm sort of a born-again Pittsburgher. I grew up in this area in the Allegheny Valley, but spent most of my undergraduate and law school days in the Midwest, first at Notre Dame and then at Loyola Law School in Chicago. where I stayed for the next 20 or 30 years. As my daughter got older, I obviously had her later in life. I really wanted her to be around extended family. And my siblings are both still in Pittsburgh. They have kids, and so she's growing up, as well as her father's sister is here. So she's growing up amongst family. You can read all that in my application. I guess what I'd like to say is I'm not here as a result of what has happened over the last 2 to 3 weeks. That did not prompt me to come here and sort of maybe in anger or protest. I actually have considered getting involved more fully with the district since my daughter was at Wexford Elementary. It's only when you become a parent that you realize how important the people that make the decisions for the school are. The materials that they read and study, the information that they get, and the administration that they select. You want them to be accountable to the people that vote for them. They have to understand the gravity of the position. So I think I was probably the last person to get my application in because, frankly, in this climate, I sort of was thinking, be careful what you wish for. But I bring to the table a lot of crisis management experience, both as an attorney and as a member of a senior management team. When I was at the YMCA in Chicago, you know, when a kid dies in your pool or one of your housing facilities burns down, you're faced with some of the same pressure that you all are facing now. And I think I bring a measure of calm, authenticity, experience, level-headedness, and being a lawyer doesn't hurt either. Although, you know, that's not what would not be my principal job as a director. You can read the rest of my background on my resume, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much for that opening. From your perspective, what are the biggest challenges that we face as a district in the next 7 months?
You have a hot crisis right now, and it seems to be deflecting attention away from any other issues, such as strategic vision, other decisions that the board needs to make for the administration to function properly. I think part of the reason there is a crisis is twofold. And I do not, in full disclosure, I do not know any of the coaches, nor any of the administration or any of the directors. First, there's a tendency when things like this happen for people to rush to judgment. The first thing that they are frustrated with is the inability to understand how it happened, why it happened so suddenly. And frankly, they don't have an understanding of the process you all are bound to, including things like confidentiality of personnel investigations. So there is a lot of noise on Facebook and elsewhere about why is this secret, why didn't we know? But as you and I both know, personnel matters are extremely sensitive, and there's no perfect way to handle it. This is not a situation where any of you were going to be applauded for the decision, whether it was right or wrong, and I have no idea, as I am not privy to the facts. But the second thing that struck me is, it's not clear from the communications that went out, who conducted the investigation. And I would hope with, I think it's Mr. Moy, he used to be a football coach, I believe. No. Basketball. You did. That you would hope there was an independent investigation, sort of personalities removed from it, and overseen by somebody with experience in these matters. You'll get through this. The next 7 months cannot be about the firing of the football coach. This one part of the district. You know, in my view, sort of the education of all students, full enrichment of all students is your number one priority. It's going to be difficult, and it's not going to be popular. But I do think you have to stick with your guns about upholding the policies you drafted and adhere to, and not give in to public pressure.
Thank you.
Hi. First of all, do you prefer Kathleen?
Kathleen is fine.
Kathleen, Miss Ravati, Mrs. Ravati?
Ms. Ravati, I'm not a Mrs., I'm a
Okay,
Ms.
Miss. Okay, which do you prefer for this?
Kathleen is fine.
Kathleen,
yes.
okay. Hi, Kathleen. So first of all, I got to tell you, I'm going to steal this. Born again Pittsburgher. I lived in Cleveland for a while, so I'm going to use the born again Pittsburgher again. I think that's a great line.
There you go.
But that's not the question here. So the question, well, first of all, thank you for coming out. But the question that I have for you is, not that we're not facing tough things already, but in a different instance, assuming that the school board were facing a tough budget decision, where the decision was based on we raise taxes or we cut programs, what would you do?
That's a tough one. There's never enough money in any budget, corporate or not-for-profit or educational, to go around. I think you're going to have to probably, maybe there's a balance. Maybe it's not all of one. Maybe it's a partial tax increase that is justified to the community or explained to them as to why there's either a budget deficit or a shortfall of operating funds. Cutting programs is also tough because they're important to students, and I don't think we knew that as much as we do now, having just come out of the quarantine and the homeschooling. I saw my own daughter suffer greatly from lack of interaction with her peers and lack of programming, other than being with me all day. It would depend on the circumstances, and it would depend on if it's a short-term budget problem or sort of a long-term funding problem. But I think you'd have to consider all options. And again, you don't join the school board or any board to win a popularity contest. Tough decisions have to be made. And this part of the job is sort of taking the heat, unfortunately. But you all are bound by different duties than someone that's not a part of the board. And so I think that's important to understand that.
We've never done that.
No, I can see that.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, Kathleen. It was nice of you to come tonight. Thank you. Thank you for coming out to serve the community. So the question is, what is the best way to address differences of opinion on the board, meaning between board members, or between the board and the administration?
First, I think it's important that you're in an environment where everybody feels free to express disagreement and to sort of argue the opposite side. Eventually, you have to get to, I don't know if it's compromise so much as it is, I mean, you'll eventually get to a consensus. A majority of the board will eventually decide that it needs to be one way versus the other. You try to do that with as much acknowledgement of the competing director's position, and if you can, incorporate some of it. When it's not an easy thing to do, but this happens on boards all the time. Everybody has to have an opinion. It doesn't mean you need to vote like your fellow board director if you don't believe in the matter. Disagreements with the administration, I believe that's always going to happen. I sort of equate Dr. Miller to the CEO who has an agenda he wants to push. I mean, or he wouldn't be a good educator, right? The board's job is to sort of weigh that and make sure that it's in the best interest of the district as a whole, and that it's what your constituents want. And nobody knows what goes on behind closed doors. That's why you have executive committee. It's never going to be, it most likely won't be harmonious decisions all the time. And I think you have to be respectful of disagreement, allow it to occur, and then make the best decision you can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ravati.
Do I stay?
You remain. You can sit now,
Thank you.
but I like standing while
Mr.
talking
Chilio,
too.
could you ask Mrs. Beisel to come in? Mrs. Beisel?
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Thanks for waiting. So this is just your time to give your introductory statement to the board, and then we have 3 questions before we bring the next candidate in.
Perfect.
The floor is yours.
Hit a button or not yet?
Par-
Yeah, just push that
Just make
button.
sure, yeah, make sure.
There you go. Now you're good.
All right. Well, I'm an introvert, so I have to write everything down. So my apologies for reading. But I just want to start by saying thank you for this opportunity and your continued service to the district. I know that serving on the board of directors or the school board can be a little bit of a thankless job. So I just want to commend you all for your service. I realize that you've probably never heard of me, and I'm a little bit of an unknown in the district, and a little bit of an unconventional choice maybe. My 2 sons are in kindergarten and 2nd grade at Wexford Elementary. I was a small business owner in Pine Township until the COVID-19 pandemic shut us down. I've spent the past 10 years working in national education reform, specifically in the charter school movement, not advocating for charter schools to come to Pine Richland, so I have to put that out there. But I fundamentally believe that a high-quality education is a right in this country, and that every child should have access to a great public education regardless of their race, their socioeconomic status, or the zip code that they live in. I'm here today because I did feel a call to service as I watched the events unfold in the district over the past couple weeks. My family moved 456 miles specifically to live in Pine Richland. We bought the worst house in our neighborhood because it was all that we could afford at the time, because we felt that Pine Richland gave our children the best opportunity to be successful and thrive and to grow up in a safe and supportive learning environment. I bring with me a background in public relations, communications, and stakeholder engagement. My experiences in public education span from everything. I span a multitude of disciplines, everything from teacher well-being to serving students with disabilities to family engagement. These are serious times in this district, and I know what's keeping you up at night. It's a COVID-19 outbreak in one of our schools and someone getting really sick or even dying from that outbreak. It's a student taking their life because of bullying or something far worse than we can even dare to imagine. There's more than 4,600 students in this district, and every single one of them is counting on you. And I really believe that I can play a critical role in restoring community trust and faith within the board and the senior leadership, and getting us back to what matters in our schools is making sure our kids have the best education possible and a safe and supportive learning environment. And I hope I can be the bridge to bring us all back together. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark?
Yes. Thank you, Courtney. So, from your perspective, what's the biggest challenge facing the district in the next 7 months?
So I think the biggest challenge facing the district right now is obviously we need to do some healing. There has been trauma experienced in our community because of the situation with the football program, but also the global pandemic that we are still all experiencing. But I think as we move forward from that, we need to refocus on our teachers and their well-being and their mental health, because I know that they have been through so much during this pandemic. I see it in their eyes when I drop my son off for kindergarten. I see it in the videos that my son's teacher posts. So I'd really like for us to focus on teacher well-being and mental health, and then our students' well-being and mental health. Our kids are going to have long-term lasting effects of the global pandemic on them. I know my 2nd grader washes his hands until his knuckles bleed because he's afraid of giving grandma and grandpa COVID-19. And so I think that we need to make sure our kids are okay, we need to make sure our teachers are okay, and we need to make sure that we're prepared for this new normal that we're going to be going into in school on August. What does that look like? You know, parents want to know, will my kids still have a virtual option? What's school going to look like? Are there going to be masks? There's just a million questions that are running through our parents' minds right now, and I think that it's preparing for that and making sure that our kids and our teachers are well for the next school year.
Thank you.
Hi, and just for my information, do you prefer Courtney, Mrs. Beisel, Miss
You
Beisel?
can call me Courtney. I never know if I'm a Ms. or a Mrs. because I didn't take my husband's last name.
Okay.
I don't know. Just call me Courtney.
I think it's important that people are called what they want to be called.
Just call me Courtney.
Okay, so hi, and thank you for coming out tonight. And I'm just going to start off by asking you the question that, yes, we're facing a tough situation in the community, but there are other situations that do come up. So, assuming the school board were facing a tough budget decision where we either had to raise taxes or cut programs, what would you do?
So, I am by nature a very thrifty, frugal person, and if I were a Real Housewife of Wexford, I would say where there's a Courtney, there's a way. So I think that I would first focusing on, how can we do this program better? How can we do this program more cost effectively? What other innovations? Can we go out and get grant funding? Is there a way we can combine programming? Can we look at other places that might need that we could pull some money from there? If we've exhausted all those options, I'd look at the program and see what's the student engagement in this program? Is it critical to the mission and vision and values that you're trying to instill in the district? As a fiscal conservative, I think that after we go through all of the steps of can we find more money, is there a way we can do this program differently or better using less resources? Is there, is it vital to the mission and success of our district? I would take all that into account. So I do like to base everything on fact and logic and looking at, what the data is telling me. After all of that, I would probably cut the program if we're getting, if we're hearing back from everything that we've looked at saying, well, the kids are kind of into it, but not really. Or, there's other programs that we have that are doing similar things. So it really depends on what the data tells us about the program and how it's being used and how it fits in with the rest of the educational model and the mission and values of the district.
Hi, Courtney.
Hi.
So my question is, what is the best way to address differences of opinion between board members or between the board and the administration?
So I think, coming from a place of understanding that we're all here for the kids, that is our grounding. We all want to do what's best for the kids. And I think that coming from a point of, let's put everything out on the table, let's work together, let's understand where everyone is coming from and come to a common solution. Let's hear every single voice. If we are at a standstill, send a survey out to the parents and see what they think on a direction to go to. But I think that when you ground yourself in, we are here for the kids, we are here for the best interest of the district, let's leave everything else at the door and come up with the right solution, then you will 9 times out of 10 be able to come up with a win-win that will benefit the students and make sure that we're doing things for the best interest of the district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if we could bring in Mrs. Hayden.
Correct.
Oh. Welcome back, Mrs. Hayden. So at this time, we'll just ask you to share an introductory statement to let us get to know you a little bit better. And then board members will ask you the big 3 questions that we're asking of each candidate this evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity to address today. Again, my name is Amy Hayden. I don't have anything official prepared. I've been a resident about a year, a little over a year of the township.
And I'm sorry, we're just, there you go.
Sorry, I did not
Thank
know
you.
the
I
microphone.
should have mentioned that.
apologize. Shall I start over or continue?
Sure, start over,
I
yeah.
didn't say much. My name is Amy Hayden. I've been a resident of the township probably about a year, a little over a year. I moved here with my family from Brentwood School District, where I was a school board director for a little over 6 years. And that is one of the reasons I put my name in the offering here, because I feel I have sorry, I apologize. I had my COVID shot yesterday, so my brain's a little foggy this evening. I slept most of the day. I put my name in the ring so that I could potentially provide some assistance in this temporary board position. Walking in, I do know, the state rules, what the role of the school board would be, and I know it's a temporary position. I was hoping to lend some of my expertise while learning about the district and the township at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Amy. From your perspective, what's the biggest challenge facing the district in the next 7 months?
Well, there's the big one that everyone knows about. It's everywhere right now. There's a lot of public concern and lack of confidence in the district and some of the decisions they've made. Obviously, the people that are in the room know what happened. The people in the public hear bits and pieces. They don't have the whole picture, and it's hard for people that don't understand the whole picture to accept something they may not agree with at face value. So the biggest challenge will be to restore confidence in the school district and the board and the administration and the decisions they made, and moving forward as a whole community from that point.
Thank you.
Hi, and do you prefer to be called Amy, Mrs. Hayden? What would you prefer?
Either is fine.
Either is fine. Okay. Amy, thanks for coming out. And again, we've talked about the tough challenges directly ahead of us, but other challenges that face the school board, things like assuming that the school board is facing a tough budget decision, and the decision is we either cut a program or we raise taxes. What would you do?
That is a very familiar question. The district I came from was landlocked, had no way to expand their revenue base other than raising taxes. So this was literally a yearly conversation. So I did take a quick peek at the proposed budget, and I saw that you were tapping some of the fund balance potentially to overset the deficit, which I'm assuming is COVID related because of all the unaccounted for expenses that popped up in the past year. Personally, it's not the end of the world to raise taxes. Obviously, public is never happy to hear that, but when it comes down to it, we need to make sure the school district can proceed and grow to meet all of the needs of every student now and in the future. And if we cut a program, yes, that can cause a short-term deficit, and it hurts a lot of people immediately. And raising taxes could hurt homeowners in the long run. But at the center of the room is the children. So personally, I'm not saying I'm voting on it today. I would look at taxes at a higher priority because the long term of the school district, not just today, is what is important.
Hi, Amy.
Hello.
So, my question is, what would be, or what is the best way to address differences of opinion between board members or between the board and the administration?
The best way, honestly, is frank discussion, which I know board members disagree day in, day out. And it's hard when you're on the minority position and you feel you're not feeling heard. The best way to move forward is, as a board, to come to the decision that once a vote has been taken place, you need to work together and support that decision. A vote is a vote. It's official. It's on the record. And I'm not saying it happens here, but to talk behind or badmouth or second guess, it doesn't promote the public confidence, that you need from the community. And administration, I, as a member of the school board, I had participated in some furloughs, which obviously is never a good experience. But we had the backing of the administration, even though they didn't want to do it. We had to foster that working relationship. And so we had to move forward with it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. DeLisio, our fifth candidate. Welcome back, Mr. DeLisio. You're welcome to have a seat and simply give us a few moments to introduce yourself to the board, and then we will go around and ask the three big questions we're asking each candidate this evening. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, microphone. If you could flick on your microphone, you'll get a little red light.
Yeah, green light. I'm so used to doing these on Teams that I don't have to worry about that. I am Charles DeLisio. I live in Gibsonia.
I'm going to pause you while Mr. Karpinski replaces your mic, since that one's a little out of balance.
Better?
Yes.
That sounds great.
Charles DeLisio. I live in Gibsonia. Normally I go by Chaz, short for Charles. I have two girls in the district, one who is graduating in this year and off to college, and then the other one who's moving from Eden Hall to the middle school. Both have been in the district since kindergarten. It's been a good experience for both of them. My oldest competes with the Pine Richland crew team. My youngest is more interested in things like performance, whether it's chorus or learning the guitar. She's been a little disappointed this year because those things have been cut back, but everyone has to live with that. When I sent you my application, I had indicated that I thought that of these principles, my strong area or interest area would be in thoughtful planning. As I went through did a little bit of research on the website today, there were a couple other things that popped out. And I'll hit you with those real quick. One would be health and wellness, which has always been part of my life and philosophy. That's important, obviously, to the kids in this district. Second would be Title IX, which is something that you have discussed here, and while it's a very old law, it represents an opportunity, or opening up opportunity to everyone, and I think that's important. Finally, and I had forgotten about this, Beatty Tech. I did 2 years at Beatty Tech as a fill-in teacher. There was a computer-aided design class that went from full-time to part-time. The teacher didn't want to take it. It was open for 2 years, and I filled in. So I've been a teacher at Beatty Tech. It's an important program for all of the districts that participate. Be certainly interested to see what's happening with that. And I would say that's my introduction.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So, would you prefer that we call you Chaz or Mr.
Chaz
Lucas?
is fine.
Okay. Thank you, Chaz. So, this is a very unique situation because the seat is temporary. So we have 7 months, and over those next 7 months, what, in your opinion, from your perspective, what's the biggest challenge that we face as a district?
I would say that managing the change in things as COVID and the pandemic progresses, paying attention to what's happening, restructuring things throughout the summer, and getting prepared for the fall.
Thank you.
Hey, Chaz, how you doing?
Good.
Full disclosure, Chaz and I do serve together on the Pine Township Board, so I have had occasion to meet Chaz before and deliberate in a board setting, so full disclosure. But Chaz, so obviously we're facing tough decisions right now, things going on, but a specific instance, assume that the school board were facing a tough budget decision where we either had to raise taxes or cut programs. What would you do?
I think it would depend on what programs were slated to be cut. There may be some that it's kind of a hard thing to respond to without really getting into the details, but there needs to be an evaluation of first, what programs could be sacrificed or changed or scaled back in order to deal with the limitations that come from the budget. I think you have to recognize that those limitations are real. That's just part of life. But then after that evaluation and discussion amongst the board, I think it simply comes down to a decision as to what's going to be sacrificed versus raising taxes. I don't think you should be opposed to raising taxes, but I would also tend to think, without knowing all of the workings of the district, there should be some opportunities for cost savings without raising taxes.
Hi, Chaz. So I have the third question. So what is the best way, or what do you think is the best way to address differences of opinion between board members, as well as between the board and the administration?
Well, I think that the initial thing that needs to be done for that is that there needs to be a history of clear and open communication. I think that people have to understand how to address each other without becoming combative. I think it's very important to listen, because I think sometimes communication communication breaks down, not because people have very different opinions, but because they're not understanding it the same way, or in fact not using the same language. I did serve on the board of directors of AIA Pittsburgh. That's a professional organization. We occasionally dealt with some controversial issues. One of them had to do with the eligibility requirements for an awards competition, and these are very big things, and people see the awards as a way to promote their business. And the issue came down to for a competition in Pittsburgh, where if the project were in Pittsburgh but the architect was in California, could they still enter? And as the board, we had to make that decision. It became controversial, and in fact, because there was a high-profile project in Pittsburgh designed by a firm in California, which everybody thought was going to win if it was allowed in. But after going through all of those discussions, the board, while still divided, did reach a majority decision. Personally, there was one guy on the board who I really never got along with and rarely voted with him, but we wound up on the side that said, open this up. Don't be afraid. But the most important part was we managed to keep the group working without creating animosity that was, while there may have been some that night, it eventually just went away. That was just through communication, being respectful, and really listening to what people are saying.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, board members, for your questions. The next phase of our interview process has two components as well. We will ask you more free-form questions if desired, and you may ask board members questions. For that first portion, if a board member has a question to ask, Ms. Williams, I believe we designate, do you have a list for us to go in? So ask your question. Ms. Williams will designate the responder and the subsequent responders, and then we'll rotate so we don't keep picking Therese over and over again to go first, as an example, because you're right there. Okay. So if there are other questions from board members at this time.
I do actually have one. This past summer, a group of concerned students and concerned parents approached the administration and the board with concerns related to diversity, equity, and inclusion at Pine Richland School District. As a board member, how do you see your role to meet the needs of traditionally marginalized students?
With that, we'll start with Mrs. Beisel.
Thank you. So this is a question that we talk about in my professional job almost every single day, because we develop tools and resources for the education community, and one of the big topics that we deal with is diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think the first thing is, one of the principles that we always say is not about us, without us. So making sure that those students and the parents and teachers that are part of this are part of the conversation so that they're not so decisions are being made about them without them. So that's the first thing I would say, is making sure that everybody has a seat at the table when you're making these discussions. Another thing that I would recommend is putting together a DEI framework or handbook for teachers, for the board, for administrators to use. Develop it collaboratively with stakeholders, but put together something that frames how you're going to talk about things, what norms you are going to bring to conversations and discussions, and being leaders in it. I think that that's a big part of it too, is that when students and parents and teaching staff see you change in the way that you talk about it and think about it, they will too, because you're the leader. So I would just in summary, bring together all those stakeholders so that they are part of those conversations. Start working with that framework in order to change the norms around it within the district and change the way that you talk about it within the district.
Mrs. Dawson?
So any organization that is successful has a mission, vision, and values. And part of how any successful organization functions is by having, standards for certain principles built into their mission, vision, and values. And so these are just ways that we operate as an organization and as a member of a board. That is part of the responsibility of a board to set the tone in agreement with the administration as to how those mission, vision, and values are created and policies around those things. And that is the objective manner in which you run any kind of successful organization. As far as balancing that or individualizing that becomes part of this stakeholder opportunity at the moment in time based on the person who's experiencing. I work in healthcare, and this is not a foreign concept to me because it's baked in. It's already baked in, so you treat others the way that they want to be treated, but you also have norms that you bake into your mission, vision, and values. So we have to always keep in mind that we're an academic institution. And when you're an academic institution, that means that learning must take place. And the way and manner in which learning takes place is a unique and individualized experience as we, design the, little student in the room with all the moving parts. So how that's experienced by each individual student should be ingrained in the culture. So you cannot move your organization away from the strategic mission and the objectivity for the sake of always appeasing what seems inequitable, or you will lose at what you're trying to accomplish. So I hope that makes sense in saying that leadership matters, in that if you're we as leaders have a mission, a vision, and a values, the administration carries it out. We objectively apply that. That should be sufficient.
Mrs. Hayden?
Great answers here. Great answers here. There are always marginalized groups in any community, and the role of the school is to include them. And off the top of my head, one of the best ways is to review the curriculum. And I know it happens every so often, but when you do so, review the curriculum to make sure that that is addressing that as well, because if it's part of the curriculum, the kids hear it every day from the teachers, and it flows down to the other students, and that carries through. And in the older age groups, like student groups, and creating a safe environment, especially in the high school and middle school, when everybody starts getting their own little opinions and forming their little groups, then that can lead to exclusionary groups. So I think it should be top down from the administration, looking for a more inclusive curriculum that covers more areas than traditionally, as we know. And it's been that way for a very long time, and I think we're at that point where you need to incorporate that in the day-to-day. Thank you.
Mr. DeLucio, maybe next.
Well, I would say that I certainly support the point about looking at the curriculum for that. But I would say that Pine Richland has not been a district that has not wanted to include people, and in fact has taken certain steps to actually promote inclusion. So I would think that the first thing to do would be to take a look at what has been done in the past and evaluate the results as a way of determining what the next actions would be. The second thing would be that I think it will be building or particularly like grade specific, that what you would do at Eden Hall will be different than what's done at the high school. And then finally, it would be an ongoing process of going back. Once certain ideas are vetted and the thinking is, let's do this in Eden Hall and let's do this in the high school, go back and find out how it's working and see if from the people in the building, teachers and staff, if what the board has promoted is working, and adjust as necessary and then build that into an ongoing process. It shouldn't be just done at one time, and we shouldn't forget about what's been done before.
Ms. Ravati?
First of all, the Pine Richland School District is not going to solve the problem of inequality and marginalization. As noble as that sounds, my colleague mentioned a sort of a top-down approach to culture, but bottoms-up is really important too. And one of the things I notice about the district is from day one, Wexford Elementary, now Eden Hall, there's a Ramway, I may have it wrong, my daughter recites it to me all the time. They are instilling values in the students. I think they do a great job at recognizing and identifying problems when they happen and sort of trying to nip it in the bud. I recall this situation. I have a very good friend who is the mom of 3 African American children, and this really hits the sweet spot for her. It definitely has to be something that the entire administration and school board promotes and actively includes. I will say one thing, adding additional programs, seminars, webinars to teachers on these kinds of things, they're already pretty tapped out. I mean, I think we have to be somewhat sensitive to how many times are they going to go through a new retraining? How many times are we going to change our curriculum? You have to be responsive to what's going on in the world. At the same time, not knowing exactly what the inequality is. Is it poverty? Is it race? Is it religion? Some of the demographics are not within the board's control, and that's a bigger problem than this just Pine Richland. It depends on what developments are going up, and I spent some time before the township board with respect to some of these issues, and there's a lot of development right now. Whether it's going to lead to more diversity is a good question. So you can't control the inflow. All you can do is give good programming from the get-go and nip it in the bud when you see it. And the parents have to be involved to a large extent because the kids are going to pattern parents. So it's not an issue I don't think any board can solve. But you do have to give voice to the problems that are occurring, maybe take constructive input from the folks that feel marginalized, and get some ideas from them. What would make the situation better for a group of people that are currently marginalized? It might be easier than we think.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the board at this time? Dr. Malik.
Thank you all for demonstrating your courage for being here and stepping up. So we've been through a pandemic. We're still in it. We've learned a lot along the way. So what about it should continue in education once we're through it? 6 months from now, a year from now. What should continue that we've learned?
Mr. DeLucia, if you'd like to start.
I think that the option of remote learning should be continued in some manner. I have heard that some kids have just flourished in a remote learning situation. I would not say that I would understand exactly why, but I believe that there are some kids who will react better to that. I think that there are benefits, social benefits to being in the building. Perhaps that becomes some variation of the hybrid model that is here right now. And then the other thing that I would simply add to what should continue would be an emphasis on health and things that we can do to be sure that everyone's staying healthy. I'm not advocating that we wear masks forever, but there are certain things, whether it's just sort of keeping your hands clean and covering, that will be beneficial during our next flu season.
Ms. Ravati?
I think the district did a really remarkable job in adjusting to the conditions that were sort of imposed upon it. Everything from the teachers to the communication. Rachel Hawthorne, who is the best communicator I've ever seen, honest to God. She responds to every single annoying email I send her. She's a great front person for the board. What to continue? I mean, that's the question of the day. Depending on where you live and what state, everybody has different ideas about what's supposed to happen. I think we do have to start demystifying this for the students and sort of taking away the climate of fear. I don't think the statistics bear out sort of the predictions that were made about COVID-19. Certainly with people in immune-compromised situations, very dangerous for. I don't think there's very few fatalities in children. Obviously, the teachers are concerned too. I don't believe that we should continue the masks. Again, I don't think their efficacy has been established, and I think it's a real social barrier for the kids and the teachers. I have a hard time communicating through the mask. When I can't see somebody's lips, I have a hard time understanding my daughter right now when we both have a mask on. It's a barrier, and I think, don't get me wrong, the teachers have done an unbelievable job. The remote learning was thrust upon them without any notice, and first 2 weeks might have been rocky, but they picked it up immediately. So you have good plans in place. They were enhanced over the year, and I saw things get better and better the next year. As far as remote learning and continuing that's a huge fiscal and physical burden on the district. I have no idea sort of what that costs to have remote teachers, because I believe that's where we're at now, teachers that are 100% remote. They're not having the teacher teach both online and in-school people at the same time anymore. I also think that it's important for children to interact with people their own age on a regular basis and learn how to navigate through life. It's very easy to be a top student, secluded in your room with your computer, never having interactions, both social, academic, and otherwise, with your peers. And unfortunately, life's tough. And I would probably have done very well with remote learning because I would have been finished really fast. but I would not have learned half the things I did had it not been, going to school every day and learning the other things about life that are important. Obviously, we have to wait to see what the governor says about mandates. I know that the schools are in danger of losing funding if X, Y, and Z isn't done. All those things need to be looked at, but I think we have to remove the stigma of fear from our kids, so that this isn't the only thing they think about. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mrs. Dawson?
Such a relative question, because I think that what we collectively have learned from COVID is based on one's perspective. As a healthcare person, I have certain perspectives. I think that what we've learned academically or in a learning community is, as was stated, one size doesn't always fit all, and we were surprised to see that some students learn better remotely. And that's a good thing. I always had that hunch myself, because not all students need to socialize at the same mandated rate as other students. So I think that was something that perhaps we've learned about the academic environment. I also do think that there's probably opportunity for those that learn in a certain different way, can either accelerate their learning in a remote way and feel quite content and still find socialization in other forms. So to answer the question, I would say, what should we keep? I think that we should keep the perspective that the great job that you did asking the parents and the students what they want should continue. And then use that to make further decisions as you transition into a, again, new learning model that would probably be more like a new norm based on that input that you did a very good job at gathering.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hayden?
I just realized in my introduction I didn't mention, I do have a child in the middle school currently, so we've been on the front lines with everybody else with the whole virtual, hybrid, in-person. Everything seems to change every other day. So from my perspective, what would be continued after the pandemic, the one thing I did appreciate was the one-to-one technology that was provided by the district to all the students to make sure, no matter which option they chose, they had the capability to do the work. We personally were able to afford internet, so I'm assuming there was some sort of program in that, so this should continue to make sure every student has at least internet capability in their home, not relying on mom's phone or something trying to do their work. Because using the one-to-one technology, going forward, when a student has a sick day, even if we're not streaming classes live like we did previously in the hybrid, they're at least able to access their homework and know what they missed. Same with vacations, families travel. You used to have to walk around to all your teachers and say, "Teacher, I'm going to be out this week. Can you please give me all your worksheets?" This way they can log in remotely from the beach, from where they are, and make sure they are keeping up with their schoolwork. Another thing I would say is, with the crowding and the spacing, it might be, and everyone loves the smaller class sizes, depending on the state, the state may even come down and mandate fewer students per square foot. And I think looking at that, if we have the capability to potentially do that ahead of the state or anyone telling us to, that's never a bad idea to limit the number of students in a space. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mrs. Beisel?
Well, I just do want to commend the district on what an amazing job they have done during the pandemic. I think when you kind of live in the Pine Richland bubble, you forget that there's kids in this county that have not yet gone to school yet in person. The district that we left, they had their first in-person day for kindergartners on April 22nd. So I just want to thank you all for making really hard decisions at the start of the pandemic and throughout it to do what was best for our kids. I'm really excited about the virtual school option continuing. I do work in charter schools. There's a lot of really bad virtual charter schools in Pennsylvania, and I think it would be amazing if we could bring those kids back to the district, because I believe they will get a better education. Some of them are good, but a lot of them aren't. And so if we're able to bring those kids back into the district and have a better education than they're getting now in one of the virtual cyber schools, I think that that would be amazing for those kids. I do love the option that virtual schools give to parents. It's an alternative to homeschooling where you have a curriculum given to you, but you still have your kids there and you're still part of their education. And so I do think for a lot of families, that's a really great option. So I'm really encouraged by the district looking at that and finding the right solutions for our kids. You know, I agree. As a mom of little ones, I love the smaller class sizes where my kid went from 24 students in a class down to 16. I know that that's a big burden on the district in terms of teaching and space and stuff like that, but I just saw my kids really benefit from that. I agree with the keeping up the cleanliness of the kids. We have not had pink eye this year. We have not had the stomach bug. So I think masks are working and the cleanliness that the kids are doing. So I appreciate that. And I just really would love for us to continue this creative problem solving. I mean, the stuff that I've seen come from, my only perspective is Wexford Elementary, but the stuff that I've seen come from my kids' teachers and the way that they've been able to solve problems and the way they've been able to teach the kids about resiliency is, I think, amazing. And I would also love for us to continue our appreciation of how hard our teachers work. I did not know how hard it was managing a classroom of 16 second graders until I listened to it on a Google Meet. So I think that we all really came to have an amazing appreciation for how hard our teachers work and everything that they're giving our kids. And so I would just love to see that continue as well after the pandemic.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from board members at this time?
I do, if no one else, because I've already asked the question, but if no one else has, I have one question. So first of all, I'm just going to give you guys a heads up as an example of a difficult board decision, because this is going to be a difficult board decision. We have 5 obviously qualified candidates, so I just want to thank you for that. I also want to not thank you for that because you're making this difficult. So we only have one vote tonight, and so I'm going to apologize for that ahead of time, because 4 qualified individuals are going to walk out of here, not a board member tonight. So I just want to keep that clear. One thing that I wanted to talk about is at some point during tonight, every one of you has mentioned communications, and in one way or another. So one of the board goals that we have set for ourselves is, and this is directly from the board now, is direct communications with our stakeholders, with the community. So what I would like to know from you is, what would your perception, or how would you envision good communications from the board as a whole, as a group, to the community?
Sorry. Mrs. Hayden?
Thanks for that easy question. Obviously, I'm a parent, so I've been getting all the emails and all the information on the website and everything. And I'm also on a couple of Facebook pages, and people are complaining either it's too much or not enough. I can't tell. You know, everyone has a different opinion. So I believe that the district has been doing as best job they can this whole time, because things change day to day, week to week, minute to minute, in communicating via email. One thing I know that could also be implemented is calls, like an automated system where you're calling information such as, hey, can attend the school board meeting and we're discussing such and such. Because not everyone reads emails, especially, and I know they include a lot of information, but they're very long sometimes. I'm trying to skim, see if I make sure I got all the important information, but I don't always read them line for line. But a quick little phone call may be a little more accessible to a lot of people who don't check their emails regularly, or even those that don't speak English as well. Maybe they can't read their emails because it's very long and complicated to them. And another thing that you could potentially do is, I know you get the in-community magazines. You could put a bit more information, the lengthier pieces in that, knowing things that are coming up. You can put more information, like articles about what has been done, what's planning on being done. to keep the community informed. It's a little more robust than the Pine Creek Journal, which is the weekly publication. It's monthly, so you can give a bit more information in one go, and they can leisurely take in the information. Thank you.
Mr. DeLucia?
Well, my impression is that the traditional communication, and traditional I mean website, email, publications, things like that, that's all fine, meaning that information is put out there. You can certainly go onto the website and find out information about what meetings, this meeting was advertised, and you could certainly find out, what's going on, and people have the opportunity to attend. It seems that we had the example early at the start of the meeting where some people did call in, and while I don't know what restrictions you're under, it would seem to me that one area that could be improved is that ability to respond to something specifically. That doesn't mean that someone needs to answer tonight, but I do think it would be beneficial if there were a means that perhaps Mr. Lyons could say, thank you, we will respond to that comment by the end of the day Wednesday. Or, however that needs to be worked out. Maybe it would be saying the board secretary will get back to you via email at this particular time. So that, to me, that seems to be the area that is, say, the weakest, that there's not really, while you are open to people coming here to talk, there's not really an opportunity to get a response. I mean, maybe a forum like a town hall needs to be created. I'm thinking about the way that it's handled with political candidates where, and I realize it's taking on a lot of responsibility, but somebody stands up front and will answer questions. And often the best candidates are the ones that can navigate through that. Sometimes what will happen is the candidate will say, I cannot respond to that right now, but then they'll have some staffer say, we'll take your name and we'll be getting back to you in 2 or 3 days. And so that person's concerns are taken and addressed. So perhaps a town hall would be an interesting addition.
Mrs. Beisel?
Thank you. So I am a communications person. My bachelor's degree is in public relations and advertising from Penn State. Most of my career has been spent in public relations and communications. Rachel, I know how hard your job is, and you are doing an amazing job at it. I think one of the, and I could talk about this all night, so I would try to be brief, but I think one of the communications challenges that you all are having right now is that people don't know you, and they don't know your why, and they don't know we're here. Yeah, we voted for you, but I didn't know who I was voting for. And that's a lot of the people within the community is that you walk into a ballot room and you're like, oh, they're an incumbent, they're this. A lot of people are uninformed voters. I think you'll have far more informed voters in this year's election. Teresa, I think we're actually neighbors. You look very private for neighbors. I didn't even know that. We're neighbors, right? So, I think that is one of the challenges. It's even harder right now because we're all wearing masks. I'm not going to recognize you when we walk out of this room. So I think that it really is coming from, being able to engage more in the community and let them know your why and let them know why you are doing this and how much you care about their kids. I think that, that's a big piece of it. I think it's moving away from just communications in the traditional sense of we're going to send an email out, we have the website, we have all these things, and really focusing on relationships and, letting the community know who you are and know where you're coming from and knowing where your heart is. I think as we move forward in the community, we need to take a trauma-informed approach to communications because our community is hurting. We heard hear that on the phone. We see it in the Facebook groups. People want to feel heard. They want to feel cared about. They want to feel empathy. And so how do we lead with that while still maintaining everything that you're going through and transparency and all the things? But I mean, how do we really get the community to understand that your actions and decisions are in the best interest of the community and of the kids and of the safety and well-being of everyone? So I think that that's an important lens to apply to your communications. I think that there's ways that we can modernize our communications more, so that, you know, how do we, like, not as long of an email, or, you know, more engagement on social media through the channels, and more videos, and more visuals, and more storytelling, and those things that really make the district and all the wonderful things happening in it come alive. And like I said, like, telling our story more, talking more about your why and why you are doing this, and how you are leading with your heart, and moving more away from communicating towards engaging and creating those relationships with the community so that they do know where you're coming from. Thank you.
Ms. Ravati?
I firmly believe that there are plenty of communications and sources of information from both the administration, the board, the staff already in place, and that even if you add more, there will be people that choose not to avail themselves of those resources. And it's funny because if some of the folks commenting on Facebook and whatnot when the announcement about the termination came had actually taken time to read the procedural rules that the board abides by, they would understand it wasn't a secret action, but they're following their rules about the confidentiality of executive meetings. The board is not in charge of, the board has a fiduciary duty to the district, and it's going to make decisions that make some people happy, some people very unhappy. So you're never going to please everyone. You have to take the information and the facts that you have, sort of make the best decision you can, and then stand by your guns. I think one of the ways you can improve communication is by multi-blasts. Sort of the communication to, I believe, parents and the community came a day after the actual termination. I understand the whys of that as someone that has formerly handled employment cases. Perhaps there's a way to even direct people to, you know, our rule doesn't allow us to share executive committee minutes and all that sort of thing. This isn't sleight of hand. This is us doing our proper governance. I don't agree that sort of a town hall free-for-all would be productive, but perhaps there's a way to get a parent representative liaison to the board. IMSC liaise with the Northern Regional Police, with the township, some other entities in the community. Doesn't have to be a voting position, but perhaps there's a way that that parent can get input from a group and then bring it to the table. A free-for-all never benefits anyone, and it usually is emotional, can get very nasty, and you lose sight of what you're trying to accomplish. I do agree, though, that parent input might be a way to sort of segue that communication so that they know that someone that is just like them understands what's going on or has been informed to the extent you can.
Thank you. Mrs. Dawson?
I think of communication in three categories. The first category is proactive, which is setting expectations. It's sort of appealing to the thoughtful, the thought space. And I think that the district does an excellent job at that. You're proactive, you know, let us know, set the tone, and give us things to think about. There's a second type, which is reactive. And reactive communication is usually what occurs when you're mitigating something negative that is emotionally charged, and the thinking about all this other stuff is sort of absent from the moment. And that's where I think, you know, a collective community such as a board and a community at large is challenged, because that's where trust can get broken down. And then the third category is the responsive communication. And that's the place where both the thoughts and the emotions are mitigated together by a personal approach. And I think that during COVID, personalization has been very, very challenging. I think that emotions are higher. I think that the things that are near and dear to us as humans have been stolen away from us very slow and rapidly all at the same time, almost that we're used to being emotional now. And so I don't have Facebook. I don't use social media. I don't want that noise in my life. So my responsiveness is usually on a personal level, getting to know my neighbors. I walk my dog, you see me. I have a cute little COVID doggy now. Her name is Ruby. But I think that that is the place where we have the most opportunity as a community, and how to mitigate this current communication crisis that we're in. And you know, that's one of the things as a nurse that I'm pretty practiced up on. So the other thing I want to say about that is, as a board member in my past board life, you know, the personal emails, so getting back to some of the comments about, you know, why don't we respond, I would find myself after board meetings or when something was discussed getting personal emails. And that's how I became responsive, because I would get to know and reach out to that person to better understand both the emotional and the thought behind what their need was to have better communication, which is what brings me to the good questions, so that we can collectively come to a reasonable agreement that addresses everyone's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you all. And I can guarantee you that Dr. Mihalik is kind of charged with some of our board goals. We'll be discussing some of the ideas, and some of your ideas are going to be stolen, just saying. So, thank you.
Not stolen, informed.
You say potato?
If there are no further board questions, we can move at this time to questions from any of you for us. It's not necessary to direct your question. I may, if that helps, but is there anything that you, as candidates, would like to ask us about Pine Richland, about serving on the board, that we can answer for you before we move to voting? It's pretty unique to have two people with, I think, combined almost 2 decades of board experience come out for this, and we appreciate that. I want to thank you for your thoughtful answers and suggestions. I want to say again, it seems obvious to me that this is what democracy is, but it's not that obvious in this community right now. One of the emails I got a few this month, and one of them suggested, boy, this is a pickle. You know, I understand you've worked in employment law. You understand we have obligations. What if we could have a body, independent body, parents, people in the community? We have a lot of professionals, a lot of professional experience, good people, who could come, review decisions of the administration and sort of, you know. I said, yeah, it's a great idea. We'll call it a school board. This is how we come together. This is how we come together, and this is how we make decisions as a community. If we reach a successful majority tonight, we will appoint one of you to fill a seat on this body through December 5th, 2021. As Ms. Dawson pointed out, it's got nothing to do with the election. There is an election pending. So I've been asked that question to clarify in the community. I've also been asked, because it may seem sort of easy and obvious, there is a candidate who also withdrew, right? Why we just don't appoint the person who's still on the ballot. And the answer is that's just not an option. They're not here tonight, so they did not apply. So I can't speak to that any further. This appointment has nothing to do with the election and all the vagaries of what may or may not happen due to a withdrawn candidate. So no matter what happens in the election, and this is important too, no matter what happens in the election, the appointee tonight will serve through December 5th, 2021. As will the 4 members of this board, 3 members of this board, whose seats also expire at that time. It's worth mentioning that there are 5 of us, Mr. Greg DiTullio, Dr. Carla Meyer, myself, Mark Kashani, and Dr. Mihalik. There are 5 of us whose seats go on until December 2023. You are all looking in fine health. I look forward to serving with you through 2023 in December, regardless of the outcome of this election as well. So I just wanted to clarify that. Again, what you've done by coming here tonight is to elevate the democratic ideals of our community, this Commonwealth, and the country. I cannot thank you enough for that.
Just a quick comment on behalf of the senior team. Again, we really appreciate you being here. It's been a pleasure to listen to your thinking. And the questions that are asked are really tough, and some of them do not have clear answers, even when all the facts and information is on the table and even after civil discourse. And so that's the challenge, I think, of leadership and governance. It would be wonderful if just getting it all on the table would make it clear. It just sometimes doesn't work that way. And so it is a pleasure to serve with the board, and it was a pleasure to listen to your thoughtful responses tonight.
Thank you. Board members, so just to review the mechanics of the voting process. Am I good to go, Barb? I
You
feel
are
like
good
I'm
to
free.
go. In your folders,
We don't do
you-
this that often, so
In your folders, you should find several sets of ballots. You're going to start with the white ones for round 1.
So we will vote, each of us on this piece of paper. We can fold it up, pass it down to Ms. Williams. She'll collect it, and then she'll read our name. Our vote is public. There are 8 of us, so we're looking for a 5-vote majority. Once we have a 5-vote majority, our normal convention is we will move to the approval, the appointment motion itself, where we all may vote, 8 of us, recognizing that's how this body works, that the entire body recognizes the will of the majority, and that becomes our... Are you collecting or I'm still talking? All right. Give me one more second, see if I forgot anything else. In the most likely event in the first round, there is not an obvious winner with 5 votes. By convention, this board drops the lowest vote getter or getters. So if we had whatever combination you can come up with, but 2 only got 1 vote, we would then proceed to the next round without those 2 candidates in the voting. Any questions, especially from board members who are actually voting? Okay.
And I wanted to echo what Greg said. Thank you. This is tough. You all bring something, and thank you for coming out tonight.
Tangled up here. Okay, for round 1, we have Mr. Kashani, voted for Mrs. Dawson. Mr. Moy voted for Ms. Ravati. Mr. DiTullio voted for Mrs. Dawson. Mrs. Swope voted for Mrs. Hayden. Dr. Meyer voted for Mrs. Hayden. Mrs. Mizbach voted for Mrs. Beisel. Dr. Mihalik voted for Mrs. Hayden. And Mr. Lyons voted for Mrs. Hayden. So we have Mrs. Hayden has 4, Ms. Ravati has 1, Mrs. Dawson has 2, and Mrs. Beisel has 1.
By our voting convention, we will require a second round of voting. Mrs. Beisel and Mrs. Ravati only received 1 vote and are not eligible for the second round of voting.
And Mr. DeLisio will not be.
Sorry, and
included
Mr.
as well.
DeLisio, yes.
So the next round is gold, and you'll be voting for Mrs. Dawson or Mrs. Hayden.
I have to get up again.
Thank you.
There is a tendency to fold your vote, even though it is about to be read in public and on Zoom, that I always like to remark on at this moment.
It is,
It's a little tense,
I was realizing I was folding it.
3 times, and, you know, I mean, it's passing a note in 4th
It
grade,
goes back to
no
like
doubt.
school, right? No
Yeah.
cheating.
Okay. We have Mr. DiTullio voting for Mrs. Dawson, Dr. Mihalik, Mrs. Hayden, Mrs. Mizbach, Mrs. Hayden, Mr. Lyons, Mrs. Hayden, Dr. Meyer, Mrs. Hayden, Mr. Kashani, Mrs. Dawson, Mr. Moy, Mrs. Hayden, Mrs. Swope, Mrs. Hayden. We have 6 for Mrs. Hayden and 2 for Mrs. Dawson.
Given that, I will move immediately to item 2.02, which is a motion to appoint Mrs. Hayden, Amy Hayden, as school director for Region 1 for the term ending December 5th, 2021. May I have a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Congratulations, Ms. Hayden. We really appreciate so much all of you taking the time to come out. The energy in your writing and your applications was evident. The thoughtfulness, the experience that you all bring to this community. We hear time and again from people that we need to take advantage and elevate the depth of resources we have, especially in people in this community. You've shown once again why we need to do that every time. So thank you all. And Ms. Hayden, Ms. Williams will give you some information about swearing in at our next regular board meeting.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much, everyone. We are
board-
adjourned to an executive session to discuss personnel and potential litigation matters. Thank you.